At some point, every single comic book collector has either owned a video game console or at least played some video games. But sometimes, if a video game is popular enough, they'll make a comic book about it. It might be an ongoing series or just simply a promotional marketing tool. So I've gathered a list of some comic books that are based off video games, and some of them are worth quite a bit. $5,000 for some of these video game comics. Yes, $5,000. I was very surprised when I was doing this list myself. So let's get into it. So first up is we got Fortnite. Now, I've never really played the game, but it's a very popular game. They did a Fortnite Batman comic book called Foundations, and if you get the sketch cover of number 1 in a 9.8, it is worth $2,100. Yes, that's pretty expensive for a comic book. It's not even that old. But Fortnite is a very, very popular game, and there's a lot of fans. Call of Duty. Now, this is a game that I used to play back in the day, not so much anymore. But they came out with a zombies Call of Duty video game. And in 2016, they came out with a comic book called Call of Duty Zombies. And a 9.8 is worth $350. One of my favorite video games as a kid was Earthworm Jim. And I also loved the cartoon that came out with. But back in the day, people saw how much money Playmates was making from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toys. That's right, they made most of their money from the toys, not the comic books or the movies, but from the toys. And so everyone wanted to jump on that train. So they enlisted this guy who was responsible for, Spot, the 7-Up little character. And he came up with Earthworm Jim. And it was a platforming video game. Well, it spawned many sequels, a cartoon, and I think they were going to reboot the cartoon, but ended up not doing it. But everyone from the 90s knows Earthworm Jim. And if you have his first one, Earthworm Jim number 1, and a 9.8, you're looking at about $325. Now, if we go back even further, all the way to the Nintendo system, that's right, the old 80s Nintendo system, there was a franchise on there called Double Dragon, very popular. They made a movie in like 1994. I remember watching it as a kid, and I didn't think it was very good then. And if I didn't think it was good as a kid, I'm definitely not watching it as an adult, and because it'll probably be very, very bad. But anyways, they did a 6-issue miniseries for Double Dragon in 1991, and a 9.8 is worth $100. And this is graded by CGC, and these are actual sales data of what they sell for. If you want something for a little more for adults, we're looking at Doom. Doom is a very popular franchise, still ongoing. I think they came out with one where you're like a Viking or something like that. It looked pretty cool. But anyways, Doom had a promo for their upcoming video game. This was all the way back in the day, I think it was 94. And they gave away a comic book as kind of like a promo marketing item. If you have that comic book today in a 9.8, it is going to cost you $1,500. That's right, pretty expensive. If you're into more horror games, there's Resident Evil, very popular franchise. It's still ongoing to this day. I don't know what number they're on, but I played this. Me and my friends always make this joke. I played this one, Veronica Codex, and it had this level where it's like every time you wanted to like save, you had like this little typewriter or something you'd save, but you had like a chest where you could put your items, because in case you died or something like that, you can always go back to get it. And my friend was like, we didn't know where we were. We didn't know we were at the last level. And he's like, David, just bring the rocket launcher. Because I was the type of person like, no, we got to save our items for the end. And I didn't know when the end was, because this is back in the day. And I'm like, so I put all my items but a handgun and a knife. Going into the next room, I save it. Then going into the next room, and it like locks me out. And it's the final boss. And so we couldn't beat it because we just literally had a handgun with a few bullets and a knife. And I was like, oh, this is stupid. To this day, my friend's always just like, David, don't forget to bring the rocket launcher, because that was the big argument. He's like, just at least bring the rocket launcher. And I was like, no, we don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it. So, but anyways, if you have Resident Evil number 1 and a 9.8, it's going to run you $675. The Last of Us. I thought the first season was very good, but this is from a video game. Anyways, the first season of the show. I never played the game, or I did for a little bit, but not too much. Anyways, the first issue of Last of Us from 2013 is $1,000 for a 9.8. Wow, that's quite a bit. A very popular game right now, which I have played, and I think it is pretty fun. Haven't played that much, but is Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals came out recently, and it's pretty fun, especially if you want to play all the Marvel characters and in their unique styles. It's a run around, team up, shoot the other team type of thing. Anyways, a 9.8 for number 1 is worth about $50. If you want different variants of it, it could range all the way up to $150 for different variants. Now, there's a ton of different variants, probably like 20, but the most expensive one seems to be about $150. Pokemon, one of the biggest franchises video game franchises of all time. I remember the only reason I got a Game Boy was so I can play Pokemon Blue. That's how old I am. I also had the first complete set of the cards. Sold them a long time ago. It'd be worth way more now if I would have saved them. Nonetheless, if you want the first Pokemon comic book, that is Electric Tale of the Pikachu in 1998. A number 1 is $750. Ratchet and Clank came out in 2010, the comic book did, and a number 1 and a 9.8 is going to run you about $150. Sly Cooper was a PlayStation promotional comic book in 2004, but for some reason it seems to be pretty rare. People really want it, and a 9.8 is going to run you about $700. Assassin's Creed, millions and millions of different games. I think it's made by Ubisoft, but their last game was not very good, and people didn't like it at all, and it has since nearly bankrupted the company. Nonetheless, a comic book came out in 2007, and it's going to run you $320 for a 9.8. Now this one's probably going to go up quite a bit. It's already been going up, trending up, but one of my all-time favorite games, Legend of Zelda. So obviously everyone knows what Legend of Zelda is, but they are making a movie, and they're probably going to make multiple movies. They've already cast everyone. It's going to happen. Anyways, if you want number 1 at a 9.8, it's $900, but there is a no price variant, and the no price variant is $2,400. So excuse me, princess, but that's pretty expensive. And if you don't get that line, then you are not from the 90s or the 80s. Anyways, Dragon's Lair, originally supposed to be a 6-issue limited series, but then after 3 issues, they were like, oh, screw it, and they ended it. Nonetheless, if you get number 1, it's going to cost you $300. Duke Nukem, Glorious Bastards in 2011, and number 1 in a 9.8 is going to run you $500. One of my all-time favorite games I played recently is God of War, whatever one was on PlayStation 4. Anyways, if you get God of War number 1 from 2010, it's going to cost you $250. Now this one's interesting. So way back in the day, before Nintendo, they had this thing called Atari. And Atari thought it'd be interesting because comic books were actually very popular in the early 80s. They've since waned in popularity, but they were a medium that most kids would probably pick up and read at some point. Anyways, so Atari figured that video game nerds and comic book nerds are the same type of nerds. So what they did is they would package their video games with a comic book. That's right, so you would get a little comic book and a video game. So Atari Force was the first ones to do that. And Atari Force was basically a bunch of characters that were loosely based off of the Atari franchise. Anyways, they did a 5-issue miniseries, and then they got their ongoing series because it was so popular. But if you got number 1, Atari Force, it was packaged with the game, and it's going to run you about $250 for a 9.8. Probably the most famous video game character of all time is Mario. And in 1990, Valiant Comics got the rights to do video game characters. But the problem was they were just a little bit too early. That kind of happens from time to time. Just like Sears, which doesn't exist anymore, or kind of a name only, they actually created their own Amazon marketplace, an online marketplace. But they were like 5 years too early, maybe like 7 years too early before the internet really took hold. And they're like, oh, this is stupid. And it didn't really take off. Most people probably didn't even know this. And so then a few years later, Amazon comes around, and obviously Amazon destroys Sears. That's why Sears doesn't exist anymore. So think about that. The whole world would have been different if they would have just kept it going or just waited a little bit longer, because they would have dominated, similar to Blockbuster and Netflix. But anyways, Super Mario was picked up by Valiant, and Valiant was the new kid on the block, new publisher, and they wanted to get something really big. So they got video game stuff, but it just wasn't the right time yet, and it ended up not doing very well. But anyways, if you get a Super Mario Brothers number 1 in a 9.8, it's going to run you about $1,800. That's what they currently sell for. Tomb Raider and Witchblade. So this was actually the first Tomb Raider comic book. She did have her own comic book later, but in 1997, they did have a Tomb Raider and Witchblade comic book combined, and that in a 9.8 is going to run you $225. Cheetah Men. This was some weird, obscure Nintendo game that most people don't even know about, but if you have the actual game, it's actually very, very valuable. But for some reason, they did have a comic book of this obscure game that no one even really heard of. Probably most people have never heard of, unless you are a old Nintendo enthusiast and you collect all the games, even the non-licensed games. Anyways, Cheetah Man, you can get the comic book for $50. Cyberpunk 2077. For number 1 in this variant, Similin variant, and it came out in 2022, $1,500. That's quite a bit. Game looks cool. I've never played it. So one of the coolest games with the best theme song of all time, at least in the movie theme song, is Mortal Kombat. Everyone loves that theme song. If you don't love that theme song, then I tell you, you need to listen to it again, or maybe clean the wax out of your ears. Great song. Everyone loves that song. Anyways, Mortal Kombat, they came out with a comic book in 1992, and number one is worth $700. Metal Gear Solid, in 2004, they came out with a comic book. Number one's worth $150, but they do have the Foxhound variant, which is $400. And probably the most expensive comic book on this list is, you probably never guess it, but it's Twisted Metal 2. That's right, you're like, Twisted Metal 2? That's the most expensive comic book on this list? You just went through like Zelda and Mario. Those should be the most expensive. No, Twisted Metal 2. For a 9.4, there's been no known sales of a 9.8. For a 9.4, it is $5,000. $5,000. That is quite a bit. And the reason why is prior to the release of Twisted Metal 2, they released this comic book. And in order to get this comic book, all you had to do was write in to Tips and Tricks magazine. That's it. That's all you had to do is write in, and they would have sent you a comic book. They made 100 of these comic books, but guess what? Only 60 people responded. So they had an additional 40, which they destroyed. So there's only technically about 60 copies that could possibly exist. There's probably less than that because probably most kids just threw them away. But anyways, $5,000 for a 9.4. Was a 9.8 worth? I don't know. Between 12 and 20,000 is what I'm gonna guess. Borderlands, number one, the retail incentive variant, and number one in 2012 is worth $400. Castlevania, as a way to promote one of their upcoming games, they made Belmont Legacy in 2005, and the number one is worth $220. Halo came out with a comic book called Halo Uprising, and if you get number one, it's worth about $125. Another Atari video game was Centipede. Now, I played this game. I don't remember playing this in the arcade. But anyways, it came with a comic book as well. It only had one issue, but you could get it with the game. But the thing is with this is the game was very popular, so it sold probably millions of copies or something. So these comics are kind of everywhere, so they're not very expensive. So number one is about $15. Killer Instinct, a fighting video game from 1996. Number one is worth $125. Dark Souls. Now, there's many different Dark Souls comic books, but there is one called Breath of Ondulus. I don't know. I'm probably butchering the name, but I'm sure if there is any Dark Souls fans out there, they're probably yelling at the screen right now, "You idiot, Dave, you said it all wrong." Anyways, came out in 2016, the comic book, and it's worth $200. Devil May Cry, a series that I wanted to play the video games, but never got a chance to. Now I'm just too old and I just won't go back. But anyways, in 2004, they came out with a comic book that in issue number one and 9.8 is worth $400. And last on the list, and there's many other video games tie-ins with comic books that I could have done, but I decided to end on this one, is Sonic. That's right. He is the fastest thing alive, of course. Everyone knows that. Although, I don't know how fast Sonic actually is. Is he faster than the Flash? I don't think so. So he's not the fastest thing alive. He's pretty fast, though. Nonetheless, Sonic was probably the most popular video game character because Archie Comics made an ongoing series forever. I don't even know if it's still going on. It could be. So definitely the most popular on this list by far. And if you got number one, produced by Sega, Sega made the comic book and made the video game, obviously. Number one is in a 9.8 is about $850. So let me know if you played any of these video games that I mentioned on this list. I know I played probably a good amount of them at some point in my life, and I would probably imagine that most of you have as well. Anyways, have a great day.